It looks like we're at the top of the hour here. Thanks to everyone that's typing in the webinar chat. Hello to you guys. Nice to see everyone. Today I wanted to do a session that's kind of relevant for the madness that's going on right now with COVID-19 on simple tips for hosting video meetings. You'll notice kind of some new graphics on the screen. I have to thank Prezi for this. They're a presentation software company, and they really helped me figure out how to do this for the first time. So we're going to try out something new today. So one of the reasons why I'm hosting this session is I've been doing a lot of digital marketing, and I've learned a lot about hosting video meetings, and there's a lot of people out there that have kind of asked me, can I help them get started with this? And so I figured I would do a video presentation and talk about some of the things that I've learned over the last decade or so of doing these types of presentations. Rather than giving a background, for those of you that don't know who I am, I figured I would start off with my personal story here. And then we're going to go into some more about the fundamentals. If you just need some quick tips to get started tomorrow doing video meetings, we're going to talk about how to do that. This session I do plan to have recorded and available. If you miss any of the details, I'll probably go through it pretty fast and at pretty high level. But feel free to type in questions into the question panel, and I'll open up the Zoom at the end, and we'll take some questions as well. With that, let's go ahead and get started. So my personal story, it starts off with a love story, okay? Hang with me, you'll see the connection here in a moment. But back in 2011, I attended an actuarial conference. I'm an actuary by background, and I happened to, at that conference, have met my future wife. You can see in the picture here. Now, picture 1,500 statistician types of people at one conference. You know, it's probably hard to find your significant other there. But she actually lived back then in Bethesda, Maryland, and I lived in Los Angeles. And so, you know, we met for about 24 hours, after which point we went back home. And, you know, how are we going to keep in touch? Well, back then, you know, Skype was very popular, and we would Skype every day. And in fact, the relationship blossomed. We did this video connections even back 10 years ago. Fast forward to the next year, I asked my boss, you know, is it possible for me to telecommute because I have to see about a girl on the East Coast? And he was gracious enough to let me work from the East Coast, commute back to Los Angeles every month. And I began actually working remote for the next couple of years. I told him I'd be back. I'd either be back single or I'd be back married. Hopefully it was the latter, and that's what it turned out to be. And I asked the office if they could actually have the conference room set up with a video camera, because I didn't want to lose touch with people, even though I was on the East Coast. I like that feeling of being in the office. The picture here you see is actually of our cat. She was my office mate back then. So I did have someone in the office, but I wanted to have that human interaction. So that's where my background with video meetings began. But ever since then, I've utilized them quite a bit. So kind of fast forwarding a little bit more, in 2016, I actually had a job transition, and I began working in sales and marketing for the company. We were fortunate enough to have a large insurance company that we partnered with launch a new insurance product. And so they said, Mark, why don't you take the lead in helping onboard a lot of the large agencies and agents that were learning about the product? Now, being one of the few salespeople in the country for this product for a major rollout, the only way that I could really physically do it was to do it with web-based training. And a lot of you on the line there know me from the webinars that I did for that company over the next 3 or 4 years. And it was really an interesting phenomenon. Initially, I did use my camera, but later on, I actually stopped using my camera. And the reason for that is I wasn't sure if the audience on the other side was comfortable seeing me on camera. And I'll show you in a moment that I brought it back. So just this couple of months ago, I actually transitioned out of that role, and now I actually started up my own company called Buddy INS, www.buddyins.com. And the reason that I started this company is that when you're working for a large insurance company, it's very difficult to do consumer marketing. and I felt for long-term care insurance, which is what I do, and educating on that topic, it was very important to outreach to the consumer directly. So I transitioned my roles back to the home office for the insurance company. And I said, I want to partner with agents and agencies in the country and help them with their digital marketing, help reach more people, help kind of, my mission is really to help families out there with long-term care planning. So from scratch, I really started a company, and I had to focus on how do I do video meetings and how do I help other agents with their one-on-one meetings. How do we do consumer educational webinars, and basically doing a lot of the things I was doing for the agent, now I'm helping agents do for their clients on their behalf. Okay, so I think the future of business today is moving remote. We're going to talk a little bit about the events of the day, COVID-19, and why businesses are now having to be remote. But I think this was the trend happening anyway. This is probably just going to accelerate that process. It's never a bad time to get started. I would say because of what's going on right now, it's probably the perfect time to start exploring this. And hopefully through this presentation, you'll see some tips that you can pick up about how to get started. So I'm going to go into first why video meetings are important and kind of what I've learned doing this. It's probably one of the best decisions I ever made was to start doing these recorded videos. I started this process about a year ago. It was very much an experiment. I was really concerned that starting from scratch, I didn't know what I didn't know about it, right? And I know a lot of you are thinking the same thing. But I actually went on YouTube and I researched what the YouTubers were doing, the people that professionally produce YouTube videos. And I kind of replicated a lot of their approach. They share what software they use, they share what tools they bought. And I bought a few different video cameras. I bought some lighting equipment. And I tried to figure out what's going to work best there. Now, the reason why it was the best decision that I ever made, I feel, is that it's been very successful in bringing awareness not only to myself and the company that I started, but also to this topic of long-term care. And I've been able to actually engage and connect with a lot of other professionals in new ways. One of the first things I did is I started doing recorded videos with people where they would share their clients' stories about, why they got long-term care insurance, their personal story about how they use the policy, maybe their family members that have had a long-term care experience. And of course, sharing these stories helps people really understand why we're in this business. So not only did we were able to share stories, but we were able to build relationships much better. Meeting on camera with them, collaborating with them, seeing them face to face, them sharing their stories, and lended itself to building a much stronger relationship with these folks who ended up becoming partners for us, and we ended up outreaching a lot of the times to their clients. The other reason why I really like the video meetings is it's convenient for the client as well. Not every client wants to come to your office, not every client wants you in their home, and the ability to be able to be on camera while at the same time presenting the information that you normally present, I think is really nice with the video meeting software. You can also record the meetings, which is, again, another convenience factor to be replayed another time. And the one tip that I would give at first is don't be afraid to experiment and practice. You'll see I'm using a new software program here, Prezi, for example, for this presentation. It's not something that I've ever used before, but just practicing it and trying it out and seeing what works, what doesn't work. Do the same thing with the software that you're going to use for your video meetings. Now, the other reason, of course, it's important today to be looking at video meetings is, we're talking today about this, social distancing, that the government's recommending so that we can prevent the spread of the virus. And it's going to lead to a lot of isolation. But isolation doesn't necessarily mean that you have to be, you're physically alone. It doesn't mean you have to be emotionally alone when you're able to connect with people in this way. So I literally do business out of my home every single day. I'm having many, many meetings a day, and I'm connecting with people through the camera. It does feel like I'm physically with people, even though they may be across the country. So now that we have the virus, of course, there's a lot of businesses that are hosting remote meetings, and as an imperative, because they can't run their business otherwise, their employees can't come to work. So that's one of the reasons I wanted to do this webinar today. Is I think it was timely. I did kind of did it as a pop-up webinar. We did a very brief marketing because I want to make sure that you guys have this tips to get started as soon as possible. Now, there's this phenomenon that they've been talking about called flattening the curve, meaning that they're trying to stretch out when people are getting the virus by this isolation techniques. But what that also is going to do is it's probably going to extend out the amount of time that businesses are disrupted. So I do expect this to last longer, and you're starting to hear about that more and more, because the more effective we are at doing that, the longer perhaps we'll have this social distancing phenomenon. So use this as an opportunity, invest in your business, invest in practicing these types of techniques. Don't be afraid to reach out to your clients. In fact, they're more and more likely to engage with you because now it's an imperative that you meet this way. Now, in terms of communication, it's very important times to communicate. I did a video with my friend Steve Kane, about how to have the conversation with clients. There's a lot of ways that you can engage. It's not necessarily that you need to reach out to sell them something. Simply, giving them a virtual hug, so to speak, comforting them there during these times. Perhaps you're their financial advisor and they've invested in the stock market and the stock market's down. Well, being able to reach out to them and explain to them what your plan is, helping reinforce that so they don't sell low because they're afraid of what's going on in the stock market. Doing your annual policy review. There's other reasons to reach out besides a sales type of call. So take advantage of the software to do that. So I'm going to do a quick check, make sure we're okay in the Zoom, that everyone can hear me okay. Looks good. Okay, it looks like you're all being able to hear me. Okay, and I'm getting some questions. Feel free to keep typing in those questions into the question and answer panel, and I will take them at the end. Okay, so let's go into the next topic, and this is going to be the meat of this conversation today. I'll probably go another 20 minutes before we open it up for questions, so we're not going to go the full hour. But the next section is about how to actually do all of this. How do we host these remote video meetings? Before I get into the actual video aspect, I think it's important to create your remote work environment first. Sometimes, and a lot of you are experiencing this now for the first time. It's kind of a different environment than being in a physical office, but it's important that you create the same type of presence, the same type of space that you have in your physical office. So set up an office space that's distinct from your home environment. Give yourself boundaries with your family. For example, I have my two young kids at home. They're 4.5 and 2.5 years old, right? They're running around, but I still need to conduct business every day. So we've kind of created a space where I can be in the office, but at the same time, I make a lot of trips outside, both to kind of help my wife, with the kids and to interact, with the family, which is of course a great benefit of being at home, but also just to kind of create the work time versus the personal time separation. Make sure you get dressed every day. I know it kind of sounds a little strange, but a lot of people, well, I'm going virtual. I could just be in my pajamas. Why not? Right? And of course you could be, but I would suggest that you still kind of do your normal routine. If you're going to be on video, of course, you're going to want to look presentable, of course, in the videos. But I think it's an advantage to actually be able to do your normal routine. Similarly, you want to still go outside. People are afraid of the virus, but it doesn't mean you shouldn't be like walking around your neighborhood and getting exercise, getting fresh air. So make sure you're doing those normal things. And then invest in your office space, meaning that, if you have a computer and it's not running as fast, it's several years old, you may want to use this as an opportunity to upgrade your equipment, so to speak. Have a very comfortable desk chair. If you're going to be in that desk chair a lot, it's worth investing in it. And in particular, when you're doing a lot of conference calls, the most important thing is having a good microphone. And you should ask your audience on the other end how the sound quality is coming off. Because you're not able to hear yourself necessarily, but they'll tell you whether they can hear you or not. If the microphone isn't that good of a quality, I'll show you in a minute, you can upgrade it. The microphone that I purchased off of Amazon was under $30, and it's greatly improved audio quality. Hopefully you guys are hearing that today. So how do we host one-on-one? I'm going to call them ad hoc meetings, meaning that perhaps you are on a call with somebody and you say, let's do this as a video meeting. And perhaps you can integrate a screen share, meaning that you're presenting what's on your computer to them. You can meet with clients, you can meet with business partners, or you can meet even with your employees remotely this way. The steps that I would take if I were you, these are kind of my simple tips. Go to Zoom, which is www.zoom.com, and they actually have a very generous free account. They let you do unlimited one-on-one meetings. They do have an upgrade feature, and that's how they make their money. And that is if you have more than a one-on-one meeting. Let's say you have 3 people or more in a meeting, then they limit you on how many minutes you can have the meeting. But I think they do a very nice job with the software. They're one of the leaders. This is the software program that I'm using today. When you're actually setting up a meeting, once you create your account, the very first thing that you'll see when you log into your account is a personal link. And you can copy that personal link into a meeting invite, or you can email it directly to the person that you're meeting with. And then for you to start that meeting, all you have to do is click on that link, and the software will automatically launch. It may ask you to download something, but I have not had very many issues with my guests being able to attend my Zoom meetings. So the software works pretty seamlessly. And for the audio option, I usually set it up so that people can either log in with their computer and use their computer audio like I'm doing now, but a lot of people, of course, are going to use their phones. They can use their office phone or their cell phone to call in, okay? And you have both options, meaning that you're setting up a meeting, the client could be calling in with their phone, you're talking through your computer, and it just works seamlessly that way. So this is the basics. I want to kind of stay on the screen for a minute here. I'm going to reiterate this. Getting a Zoom account, just getting that link to send to people, that's all you really need to get started. That's why I said right after this call, you can set up this and you can start practicing with it, because it really doesn't take much more than that. But we're going to go into a little bit more advanced areas here, which is video meetings. Okay, and with Zoom, it's automatically built in where it will say start video. And if you click that button, then immediately your camera will turn on. You may have to select the right camera on your computer. Sometimes you have a laptop camera, and if you have an external camera, you have to choose which one you want to use. And so if you have any issues with that, just kind of experiment with the settings a little bit. They have another feature where you can share your computer screen, the share screen. A lot of people confuse start video with share screen. Again, one is going to show you on the screen, and then one is going to show your computer screen. And you can actually do them at the same time. Just a few video tips. And I do a lot of recorded interviews, 5 to 10 minute interviews with insurance specialists, with financial advisors, and all kinds of other people. And every time I do these videos, we actually do them on the fly. And so I actually coach through how to set up their equipment, but it's so simple that I can do it on the call, and there really isn't much preparation required. These are the tips that I commonly give, though. The best video quality I found, and this is what I've read and heard as well, is to have the camera roughly eye level. So if you're using a laptop camera and it's significantly lower than where your head is, where your eyes are, you may want to elevate your entire laptop on a stack of books or on a box so that your video is actually more eye level. And that way you're looking at your audience more eye to eye. Check your audio. Like we had talked about, audio quality is the most important, but also your lighting will be a little bit important when you're on video. It's best to have the light shining in your face, okay, not from behind you, which will create a shadow. So if you have a window in your office, you can face the window. If you have a desktop light, you'll want to have it shining on your face. And it actually makes your complexion look better too. So there's an added bonus there. I'm going to turn on my light, and you guys will see when we take questions at the end how that looks. And make sure that your background looks reasonable too. You don't want to have like a really cluttered office space behind you. You want it to look relatively professional. As you guys will see and have seen on the video, I have my bookshelf behind me, so it kind of is a natural backdrop. So get that all set up before you have your video meeting, and you can test out the software before you do it. Don't be afraid of how you look on camera. And I know it's hard. I always talk to insurance folks, and they're like, Mark, do you know how old I am? Do you know that I'm almost 80 years old? And plug in the number. And I say, well, it doesn't matter. The video and the lighting and things like that actually take off 10, 20 years, okay? If you set it up right, and you can kind of adjust how you look and prepare for the meeting. So it's actually better than having a face-to-face meeting in a lot of ways in terms of the preparation. But you can't be afraid of that. Again, you're trying to create this personal experience for your audience or for your clients. And I'm happy to share with you all of the equipment that I bought. I've tested out a few different devices, and I've kind of settled on what works for me. This snapshot picture that you see on this right-hand side of the screen, this is my desk, okay, my office chair. I actually use these umbrella lamps that you see on the left and the right-hand side for lighting. So I actually did invest in some lighting equipment because I do so many videos, and that way I don't have to worry about the lighting outside. I have a spotlight you can see on the desk there. That pink thing near my screen on the right is actually my audio. That's my microphone. And then you might not be able to see this, a little blends into the screen a little bit, but there's an arm that actually holds my camera, and I can actually swivel the camera. If I'm not using the camera, I can move it out of the way. But if I am using it, it's right in front of me like it is now. So I'll send you a link to this if you're interested after the session. Feel free to reply to the email you get on the follow-up for this webinar. And I'll send you a link to all the equipment, where you can buy it off of Amazon. I think in total it cost me about $200 for all the lighting, video equipment that I bought. That's expensive. So we talked about ad hoc meetings, which is if you're setting up a meeting one-on-one with your clients or your employees or something like that. But a lot of times you're not going to do it at the moment. A lot of the times you're going to plan in advance. The good thing is that it's pretty much the same process. However, if you're doing a lot of meetings, what I would suggest that you do is that you book them. And what I mean by book them is use your email calendar to send a meeting invite to whoever you're inviting, and then put the Zoom link as the location on the meeting and just refer them to that. And by clicking on the link, there's also a call-in number that you can put on there. They'll be able to actually connect with you live on the call. I personally host a lot of meetings like this every day. And for convenience reasons, I use a software program called Calendly that some of you may have heard of, www.calendly.com, and it involves calendaring. And it's kind of like a virtual assistant, meaning that it actually connects to your calendar. It looks at when you have availability, and it only lets people book you when you have a time slot available. It's very intuitive and user-friendly and inexpensive. In fact, they have a free version as well that has limited features, but I would suggest if you want to try it out, definitely check out that free version. And for me, it's actually been a big boon to my business, in terms of being able to be productive. I spend very little time booking meetings and figuring out adjusting meetings. Usually my partners or clients that we're talking to actually book their own meetings on my calendar, and then I just make my calendar as flexible as possible, and it's easy for me to kind of host them on the fly. So highly suggest that one. That's not the only software out there. And there's a lot of, there's one called Acuity that I've used that's also very good. Just like Zoom, there's other alternatives like GoToMeeting. So, I'm not, a paid spokesperson for these softwares. These are just the ones that I use that I found to be the most intuitive, but feel free to use the ones that are comfortable for you. So that's kind of the really high level, simple tips for how to host meetings. I'm going to go into a little bit more of an advanced area, which is group meetings and webinars, kind of like the webinar I'm doing right now. And just a few tips on that. The good thing about group meetings with Zoom, it's pretty much the exact same process. Just everyone clicks on the same link, and you have to send it to multiple people when you're inviting them. With Calendly, there's an option to add guests where you can add their email address. And the really cool thing about Zoom, and this is kind of, I think, something they specialize in, is that they allow multiple people to share their videos at the same time. And so I was talking to one of my friends yesterday about this, and she had a live meeting that got turned into a virtual meeting because of the virus, and they had 40 people attending, and they all turned on their Zoom video at the same time. So they had 40 people on video on the same screen. It does feel like you're in this virtual conference room, and you can see everyone else in that room. So I thought that was really cool. Make sure when you're doing group meetings, just one additional tip, that you have an agenda for the meeting, because when you have so many people on the line, obviously, you have to keep it more organized. So I would have an agenda, and in some cases, you may want to have a PowerPoint presentation if it's more of a formal meeting or educational session. So that kind of lends itself to webinars, and a lot of people use the term interchangeably. Webinar when they're talking about a virtual meeting versus a web-based seminar, which is really kind of what a webinar is. I think of a webinar like this. Usually it's one person or a couple of people presenting to a large audience. The audience is on mute, although they can interact through the question and answers in the chat box or the Q&A. And the interesting thing about webinars is I think they're very important for you to learn about, especially if you're doing seminars today. Just to give you a quick story, this week on Monday, I had a agent partner that was hosting a seminar that called me and said, Mark, what am I going to do? On Thursday, my seminar just got canceled. And he asked if we could do kind of a webinar and set that up on the fly. And I'd actually just set up this webinar. And so I said, why not? Let's go ahead and do it. And so we put it together. It took a few hours to set up all the marketing and promote it and, to get it out there. But relatively easy compared to setting up a live event. And right after this session, believe it or not, we're going to be hosting another webinar so that he can engage with the people that were attending live. And now they're going to be online instead. And so it was kind of a success story of being able to kind of come in and rescue that situation. But I'm sure a lot of you are dealing with that today, whether it's seminars, whether you're doing enrollment meetings, for example. We have a lot of agents we work with that work with employers. A lot of those things are getting canceled now. But rather than canceling the meeting, another opportunity is just to convert it into a webinar. Now, again, just practice it if you've never done webinars before. Again, it does take some practice to do these. But don't be afraid to do it, especially if the alternative is not having the meeting at all or delaying it for 6 months or more. The other nice thing about webinars is that you can combine in-person and online events, meaning that you can have a session where you're at the work site doing an enrollment meeting for employees, for example, and then also have the opportunity to have remote employees or people that can't attend in person to also call in virtually. And it kind of works seamlessly with, and how you set it up. So that's what I do a lot, is I am hosting, LTC educational webinars, sessions, or enrollments, things like that with our partners. But this is something that you can do as well. I'm going to kind of briefly touch about marketing. That's a whole webinar on its own, obviously. This is something that we focus on and specialize at Buddy INS. But for webinars, it's really important. So I want to mention a few important tips. It's important that you understand your marketing and how you're going to get people to attend the webinars. What are the channels that you're using to communicate that your customers are going to listen into? I think email marketing tends to be the most effective with webinars. And I actually did this for this webinar. I promoted it through about 7 or 8 different channels, and I tracked who registered through which channels. And of course, email is almost always the most predominant, as it was for me here as well. So take the time to create an email that's compelling, that you think is going to get delivered to their inbox, that they're going to want to sign up for. Who you're actually presenting to, of course, is half the battle. The presentation and making it, of course, interesting and educational and worth their while is the other half. Social media is another good way to promote webinars, although I would say more from a branding perspective. It doesn't lead to as many people that sign up, I've noticed, through social media, but it does let people know that you're hosting these events, and it helps you kind of educate people on what you do every day. The good thing about using a software, this is with Zoom Webinar. Again, you can use something like GoToWebinar, which is a similar software program, but they automatically set up the reminders for you. Reminders are critically important when you're doing meetings and web-based events, and the software that you use will have an option to automatically send out a reminder like you guys got on this webinar, 24 hours before, maybe 2 hours before, because people forget or they get busy and distracted. And then of course, they come back later and they say, oh man, I really wish I hadn't forgotten that. But the reminders really help them not forget that. Follow-ups are important as well. The software automatically sends out kind of a blast follow-up to everyone, thank you for attending type of follow-up. But it's important after people attend your events that you outreach to them. Very often, they're not going to come to you asking you for your product or service or what you're doing. But when you reach out to them, because they've attended the event, they'll show you that they're grateful for the information you provided. And I find that doing emails that are personal to people that have attended webinars is very effective at engaging with them and having a conversation about how this webinar helped them. You can also use phone calls. A lot of people will call each person that attended the webinar afterwards, and that's another good way to do it. So there's no right or wrong answer, but it's important that you directly outreach after the webinar. The presentation itself, you guys, I mentioned this before, and I want to give a big thanks to Prezi. They spent some time with me, helping me get comfortable with this software. Hopefully it's going well on your end. It's hard to tell right now until the end of this, but I'll see your questions at the end. You feel free to try out this software program at their website. You can also use PowerPoint. I used PowerPoint for many, many years. And important part of your presentation, just remember that this is as much attempting to be fun or entertaining as educational, right? I was going to do a screen share and show you, on my screen how to use Zoom, but at the end of the day, it's pretty simple to do, and you just have to go in there and try it. But I thought it'd be more fun to kind of show you through this presentation format and tell a couple of stories. So that's why I chose to do this the way I did. So with that.